So this video was supposed to be created to talk about Promised Consort Radahn and his abilities, but the nerf happened before that could happen, so here we are. Nevertheless, Consort Radahn still kicks a lot of ass, and it's crazy to think that he was nerfed twice, in his Caleb version and now his DLC version. And before the comment section starts off another argument about whether it was justified or not needed, I personally think that some of the visual clutter being fixed was definitely needed, and it's a nice change of pace. So my experience with Promised Consort Radahn as a co-op player was basically the same as fighting Malenia during the early stages of the base Elden Ring game. You fight the boss, try to get aggro, and the host usually dies somehow in some way. But Promised Consort Radahn was a little bit different. He does a ton of damage, and many of his moves were visually bugged for summoned players that you have to rely on timing or intuition. His meteor attack during the second phase was followed by a series of light clones that would track the player, but if you were to summon, it would now drop the clones to the floor or doesn't even exist visually. If you didn't dodge the physical hit towards the end, you were guaranteed to be hit by the follow-up light attack, which does a lot of damage as well. His charging force light clone attacks also dropped your frames to oblivion, and back then it felt like he would use it inconsistently to the distance you were to the boss. His wide upswing attack that could lead to a combo is also bugged, where the second hit would hit you despite your character being mid-roll. This move confused me for a while, and I just decided to roll away from the second slam entirely. And last but not least, let's not forget about the cross slash. I don't have to explain much about this certain move, and I'm glad you can dodge it with normal rolls now. But as a summon, you could actually dodge it more easily due to latency. But the move was still very atrocious, as you still had to position it almost perfectly, otherwise you get hit by the follow-up light attacks in phase 2. And finally, the light meteor attack that triggers when he's around 20% HP. This move ended so many of my runs trying to help other people, and I'm still confused as to why it tracks the host instead of the player that had his last aggro. If you take Malenia for example, when she enters phase 2 and goes for the Rot Flower Plunge, it always targets the player that had her last aggro. I mean, it makes sense and makes it easier for the fight as a group. But no matter what, Consort Radahn will always target the host when he uses the light meteor attack. The only way to dodge it consistently is to run parallel to the Gates of Divinity as it targets the last location of the host. It does a ton of damage and hits a 3, so it ended a lot of players' runs when they summoned me. Since there's no voice chat system in Elden Ring, all I can do is stare at the host who doesn't know that their fate is already sealed. As time progresses and fighting Consort Radahn a couple hundred times, I think I got more consistent at dodging his moveset, but some moves still get me as the visuals get bugged every once in a while. But even with all these bugs, visual clutters, and moves that seem to be imperfect, I still think Consort Radahn is a pretty good boss. He has a really good soundtrack, his moves are eye candy, and the design alone is really cool to see, and a nice throwback to Prince Lothric and Lorien from Dark Souls 3.